Imagine, it's the mid to late 2000s. Maybe you're playing through some Flash games like Penguin Diner or Raft Wars, when eventually you come across a demo for a game called Tasty Planet. You play through it, enjoy it, and go to play the full game, and then you find out that this little game spawned a whole franchise. Welcome to PlatinumBolt, where today we're looking at Tasty Planet, a gaming classic. Tasty Planet is a simple top-down video game developed by Dingo Games. It was released in 2006 and is available on mobile phone devices and PC. The main character in the game is a gray goo creature. The plot is shown solely through comic strips at the end of some levels. The first comic strip shows a scientist telling his assistant about his latest discovery, the gray goo bathroom cleaner. They place it under a microscope, and the first level of the game begins. After the first two levels of the game, the assistant touches the gray goo, who bites him and enters his body. The scientist tells his assistant, just go wash your hands. The gray goo is then washed down the drain and lands outside, where it moves to a park, then a picnic, then the ocean where it's launched by a whale into another park, and then into a city. Once there, humans start trying to attack you, using guns, tanks, and other things. After that, the goo launches itself into the sky and then into orbit around Earth. After eating the moon, Earth, and then the rest of the solar system, it moves onto nearby stars and beyond the Milky Way, eventually eating all of time and space. So, yeah, pretty interesting story, right? The main objective of the game is to get to a size specified by the level. This is done by eating creatures and objects smaller than you, while also avoiding things that can hurt you. Getting hurt will result in you losing a small bit of size. The game is arcade in style, and has both a casual mode where players can play for leisure without a timer, and the full game, which is timed and must be completed before the time runs out to complete the level. On the time levels, players can also try to achieve the medals for each level by completing the level under a certain time limit. Although the iOS and Android Tasty Planet games only have the normal mode and doesn't have a time limit. Gameplay was extremely simple on handheld. You simply tap and drag your finger along the screen to guide the goo creature around, or you do it the cool way and simply tilt your phone in the direction you want to go. For PC, you can either click and hold the mouse and move it in the direction you want to go, or simply use your keyboard. Really, both options are good, but I much prefer to play on the phone. Tasty Planet may not have a very big soundtrack, but the music does have, I think, is really catchy and enjoyable. The art style is cartoony and fits perfectly with the goofy story and fun gameplay. It also has some nice sound effects, and even the goo creature itself makes noises, both when eating things
Yummy!
and when getting hurt.
Ouch!
The original Tasty Planet is split up into 9 chapters, each with their own distinct items and characters to eat. Each of the chapters have their own set of levels, and honestly, I don't think there's a single bad level in the game, since they're all very similar. At the end of the game, the goo creature manages to grow so big it eats the entire universe. But this mass becomes too much for him and he explodes, so a new universe begins, and then they roll credits. Tasty Planet also features an additional mode known as Endurance Mode. These are variations on 3 existing levels. The only change is that the player grows extremely slowly, and it can take over an hour to beat one of these levels. They are considered the most difficult part of the game. Tasty Planet had its original release on handheld devices. It was later released to Steam, where it received updated graphics to make it look more like the second game. Those same graphics later appeared on the handheld devices as well. The original Tasty Planet is honestly one of my favorite mobile phone games, and it seems like other people really enjoy it too. It has very positive reviews on Steam, the App Store, and on Google Play, with my own viewers giving it a pretty mixed score, but hey, at least there are still some positive votes in there. 4 years later, in 2010, Tasty Planet would receive a sequel called Tasty Planet Back for Seconds. You got some updated graphics, but the same gameplay. But that's not a bad thing. After all, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And this is also my personal favorite of the franchise. The story is once again told through comic strips. The first comic strip shows a scientist telling his assistant about his new time machine, and also mentioning an accidental discovery, a gray goo blob that is sitting under a beaker. The assistant thinks the blob looks hungry and gives it some candy. The blob eats the candy and of course starts growing bigger. As it starts growing bigger, it starts eating bigger things like rats, cats, and other appliances, eventually eating the time machine itself, thus sending it to many different periods in time, including the Cretaceous era, Egyptian era, and even the far future. The gray goo creature starts small again in the late Cretaceous period, consuming the plants and animals of the era, before consuming a volcano and being hit by a meteor, which prevents the dinosaurs from going extinct. In the present, the scientist and the assistant experience changes in the timeline as they happen in the past. After being hit by the meteor, the gray goo creature travels through time again, but each time it travels through time, it reverts to a small size. Like I said, the gameplay really is the same as the original. You eat things, get bigger, later on in the game, there'll be enemies that will attack you, and if you get hurt, you get smaller. Though, like I said, even though it's more of the same, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And again, I'd say I like this game more than the first one, though they are very close. In the ending levels of the game, the scientist realizes that the goo creature will appear in the future, so he and his assistant preserve their brains so they can survive until the gray goo appears. When it does, far in the future, it is of microscopic size instead of a few centimeters like it usually is when it jumps, but the scientist has prepared tiny robots to destroy the goo while it's still small. Goo manages to avoid the robots and gets bigger, but luckily the scientists prepared a second line of defense with energy weapons grafted onto ants, rats, and cats. But the goo manages to avoid those too and eats both the scientist and his assistant. Eventually it leaps into space. From there it grows on asteroids and also defeats Earth's last line of defense, which are laser defense satellites. It goes on to consume the Earth, then the rest of the planets in the solar system, then the galaxy itself, and eventually ripping through the fabric of time. It eats said fabric and discovers that the space-time continuum is resting on the back of a turtle, which is on the back of a slightly larger turtle, and that it's just turtles all the way down. It then eats the turtles until they are all gone, but since the turtles are infinite, the goo's feast is never ending, concluding the game. Yeah, it's a very weird ending that I did not remember when writing the script for this video, but I gotta say, I love it. Tasty Planet Back for Seconds, just like the first game, did fairly well in sales and received positive reviews on every platform. The Tasty Planet franchise would return another 4 years later in 2014, with Tasty Blue. Though it didn't have the planet in its name, it is still considered part of the series. It has the same basic plot and story of eating everything in sight to grow bigger, but this time there are multiple playable characters instead of just one. And just like all the other games in the series, it received very positive reviews. Another 4 years later, the series would return with 2018's Tasty Planet Forever. Just like with Tasty Blue, this game featured multiple playable characters, each one with their own kind of playable story, giving you over 150 levels. And once again, like all the other games, it received very positive reviews, meaning Tasty Planet is a series with no bad games in it, which honestly, I think is really cool. Tasty Planet is one of those games that's just fun. It's not difficult, it doesn't have a complicated story, it's just fun. It's simple but very enjoyable. That's all Tasty Planet has to be. A fun game that can be beaten in an afternoon. You get some catchy music, a simple yet ridiculous story, and overall fun gameplay. And that is why Tasty Planet, and even its sequels, is a gaming classic. That's all for today. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like and leave a comment. Also, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel so you never miss out on future videos. Oh, and if you'd like to support the making of future videos, you can join the channel memberships, or for one-time donations, you can check out my Ko-fi page, link in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!